I'm Kevin Davis. This is the Catholic Family Podcast, and I'm very, very happy to be joined by Father Stephen McKenna. It's been way too long. I don't know what has happened. I haven't reached out enough. I think the Father to join us here on this podcast. It's been months since he's been on, and that is a shame for me, and obviously a shame for our listeners. But Father is here, and as always, thank you, Father, very much for spending your time and for covering difficult topics. That is Father's job. Father just gets into the dirty work and just takes care of that dirty business, which is awesome because it's necessary and these topics need to be covered, and Father is here for that. We do want to say before we get going on this topic that we just learned today as we're recording that His Excellency Bishop Richard Williamson passed away very quickly after a brain hemorrhage, and we ask everyone to please pray for the repose of his soul. Father, this podcast we want to talk about or ask the question: is the single life a vocation? And I guess with that question, I'll let you roll with it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. And I think when you do the searching out for it, I think it's one of those things that some of the spiritual writers are a bit divided on, but the majority would say yes, it is a vocation in life, something that, and what we mean by, and I think that the precursor to that, which is necessary, is to say, is it something that God, what vocation truly is? Is it something that God calls you to? Not to say that somebody can't sanctify themselves in that state of life, but the question is it something that you're actually called to by God to embrace? And that's why and some have a little disagreement on it. However, I think the majority say that yes, it is a vocation, an actual vocation, and that I do agree with, because as we'll see here, there are certain points of life that are conducive, and certain uh, people that are conducive to embracing and living that single vocation, and doing so to the greater glory of God, and the salvation of their souls. And so that's so yeah, it is a vocation. I do also think, though, it is a minority vocation. It's not for most. Most people are going to be called, well, most people in general are going to be called towards marriage. I mean, that's going to be the vast majority of individuals called towards marriage. There, and then there is also the priesthood and the religious life has their own vocations as well. And then I would say that that single life would be the smallest chunk of the pie. Um, and so it's, while we admit that it is a vocation, it is also a recognition that sometimes people just end up there, and that by maybe not pursuing after the vocations that they were actually perhaps called to, or praying sincerely enough about it, or whatever it may be. But not all. But not all. Some actually, it is the best way to for sanctifying their lives. And so
Well, and that was something before the show I mentioned, Father. It's actually the reason I thought about this podcast to do it with you, Father. First of all, again, because you handle these types of topics so well. My wife has been reading, and I plan to read here soon, this book, Parents, Children, and the Facts of Life by Father Henry Sattler. That's an imprimatur, 1952. And here was a paragraph. I recommend everyone who has children to get it. It has a lot of the delicate topics that are difficult. And so obviously, of course, you can bring it to your priest, but I'm sure your priest would probably be happy if you brought the book with you. And the part of this on page 51, virginity in the world, he says, virginity, as has been said, is a state of life possible not only in the cloister, but also outside it. Many of our young people are following the state in the world with a very holy purpose. Many nurses, social workers, doctors, teachers, and hundreds of others have voluntarily embraced virginity to devote themselves to their work, and through their work to God. He previously also said, however, if a man or woman were to embrace celibacy or virginity for merely selfish motives, to avoid responsibility, to have ease and comfort, etc., his or her virginity would be far less noble than marriage, as St. Augustine states pungently. So it, pretty interesting that I think, as you say, Father, some people are meant for it. And I think, but that's the thing that I've never really considered is who. And here, Father Sattler is saying, it is the people who are going to give their lives to, I guess, their fellow men in a certain way.
Yes. Yeah. So it's and I think that's a really important point to indicate too, is that um it is it is a celibate life, and so therefore it is harder than a non-celibate life. And what it also ends up having is it has additional difficulties because there's because of the nature of man, which is to say that man is a social being. We're meant to be with other people. We're meant to be part of societies, with society as a whole, and then narrowed down to family or community or church or whatever. And so um, as a priest, we live with and interact with other people that are priests. With you as a husband, you interact and with on a daily basis and live with your family. Religious have a community that they belong to, and so the single individual, you know, it's not to say that he's without social influences. He or she would have friends and certainly a church that they go to and things like that. But at the end of the day, you are always going back to a quiet house, and a majority of your time is either spent alone or interacting with worldlings at your job. And those, so it's either alone or with people that aren't improving in that way um, for the sake of being able to support yourself. And so when you realize that it makes that celibate life and that single life all the more difficult. It also makes the temptations that can come along with that, especially in today's day and age with the world the way we know it and technology the way we know it, that it's all that much more of a battle of sanctification. And that's why I think it really is something that is a narrower vocation than people anticipate um, or maybe have really reflected on it being, and that it should be something that is understood to be in that light. That it's while I think the first glance sometimes it ends up being sort of the grass is always greener. When you have dependents and when you have responsibilities of different states, you go and go like, oh boy, if I was just on my own, then I could just do what I
Mm.
needed to do and have
We
my
were
own
the
time.
screaming baby recently. That
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes it's
is
kind
that
of like, oh, that'd be a little easier. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, but I mean, I think that's just like the veneer from what like we that natural sort of uh, momentary desire is in life happens to present before us and go like, oh, like I wish I had some more time, or whatever. But in reality, I think it has its legion of its own trials and difficulties that go along with it that should be understood and which will hopefully kind of explain as we go along with this podcast so people understand it better as to what that is meant to be.
Well, and it makes sense, right? Exactly. So, I mean, vocation is basically, I mean, at least in my mind, it's like a purpose, right? I mean, my purpose on this earth is to get myself to heaven and get my children to heaven. Yours, of
Mhm.
course, as a priest, is to get yourself and all your parishioners and deliver the sacraments, etc. And so, as you say, it's a harder thing to find, I think, if you have this single vocation. So you really, again, at least according to Father Sattler, you need to have a very definite uh,
Yeah.
goal, job, doctor, teacher, et cetera, someone who is really spending their life for the quote unquote greater good. And that would be then your vocation. You give yourself and really entirely, of course, first of all to God. And again, Father says that in the book that virginity, it is really truly virginity if it is given, if it's for God, and it has to have that purpose. You can't go, you're not just going to go, and have all the graces from it unless you're also offering that, of course, for the right reasons for God. And I think that's again, everyone, I recommend you read this. It'll help with some of these tougher questions regarding
Yeah.
children. But
And I think that's like oftentimes with questions similar to this, or or just in general, right? That I think sometimes finding the way to understand it in a better light is to start off with the real foundation of a like a simplistic foundation that brings us back to like this the core basics, and then from there you can expound upon it and understand it all more perfectly. And with vocations, I think it's the same, that you kind of touched on it, and I think that this is a point that really deserves making, is what you know remember our basic catechism. Why is it that God made me? God made me to love and serve him in this life so that I can be happy with him in the next. And so whatever it is that a person is called to, it is meant to be the means by which they are best suited and best able to love and serve God by their lives, the means by which they are best able to sanctify themselves and give them the most uh, assured pathway towards heaven. And it doesn't always mean the safest course, because if that was the case, then um, nobody would become a priest, nobody would become gain more responsibilities in their lives, more things to answer for. um, but it is the understanding of that if I do what God asks of me through this vocation, um, that is the means by which I will um, I will be able to sanctify myself. And so those who are called to the priesthood, they have God, inspires them in their heart to pursue after a greater responsibility, and a greater judgment. But he also, in that willingness to pursue after that call, he provides them with, if they cooperate with grace, with the certain talents and things like that that are necessary to fulfill it more, better in that way too. So, um, and that that's I think a good understanding to realize that whatever it is that God is calling me to this particular vocation, and then and with that, that's also my means to sanctifying myself through that you know love and service of God in that state of life. um but
And you say, Father, and I think this is an important question, because I think some people have that calling where it's like almost literal. I think Father Anaya is kind of a famous one where he'll tell the story that I think he says he almost even heard it in his head. Like the voice saying, "You need to be a priest." And I think that for him it was kind of shocking, because at the time he didn't think that was his vocation, and then it was just kind of a boom. I don't think that can be the case for everyone. So I mean, how
or
is that?
most
And I
even, I don't
suppose
think
it
it's.
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. That's gotta be the rarity. So how does someone find that? I mean, I guess it's gotta start at home, I suppose, with the parents explaining what the vocations are. Again, that's kind of the topic here, right? We're saying, okay, is the single life even an active vocation, which you've said that it is. So how do you do that, I suppose, as a parent or as a teen? I mean, do you have any suggestions? I don't know, I guess in general,
Well,
how does someone actually find their vocation?
yeah, I mean, well, the thing about it is that it has to start with prayer. I mean, like that's the number one thing about it. It has to start with prayer, and parents guiding their kids to vocation. Um, they should present the vocations to them as sort of like this open, you know, um, uh, presentation. That I remember that there was a mission years ago that we used to take care of, and there's a really wonderful family as part of that mission, and with a number of kids. And I remember I was having a chat with the father of the family for a while, and he said, I regularly remind my kids to pray to know their vocation in life, and I regularly tell them that I do not care, any of those vocations are good as long as it is what God calls you to do. So that it's not, we tend to, you know, parents, just part of human nature, you tend to um, be unknown, sometimes unknowingly put your own um, desires for one the kid or another, or your own kind of reflections even upon what you think they might have as vocation. Kind of, you put that, you might start unknowingly pushing them one way or another. Sometimes parents are really wanting, you know, grandkids, and so they, might push toward, unknowingly push towards marriage. Or some parents might not want to have, really limited access to their son or daughter if they embrace the religious or priestly vocation, and so therefore you might kind of like unknowingly steer them, try to steer them a little bit away from it, or vice versa. Maybe it might be that they look at it and go like, "Oh, it was just so wonderful to have a priest in the family." So, hey, Johnny, you played mass that one time. Like, you should really think about this.
Right.
Like, this is really a
Exactly.
good idea. And so I think the present, like the instilling in your kids to pray for their vocation and to be open to whatever God calls them to is the key. I don't think, however, that in presenting and explaining vocations, um, that is one area that I really wonder um, if it's prudent to put the single vocation before somebody, because of the fact that I think it is such a minority
Yeah.
vocation, and that it also comes with a lot of hardships, and then also that the pursuing of what is the more probable in life for vocation, priesthood, religious life, marriage, that those all require a person who's already single to come out of their comfort zone and pursue after something with vigor. That if a person is single, the person, we're all start off single essentially, and when one becomes an adult, if they feel like their vocation is to marriage, unless they're a really sort of go-getter type of personality, the tendency is to not want to approach a person of the other sex and
Yeah.
make themselves vulnerable to see if there's mutual interest, or to get that ball rolling. And so a lot of people sort of remain idle in that way and need a lot of prompting and pushing. And that is going to be, 90 something percent of people are going to be called to the marriage vocation. That is the most likely thing of anybody who is not in the doesn't know their called state yet. It's most likely that they're going to be called to marriage. Um, then from there, it is, the priesthood and the religious life, and those two require getting out of comfort zone. It's like if you tell a young boy that he's just sort of like finished high school, and it's like, all right, hey, you want to go, like, you want to go off and do 6 or 7 more years worth of schooling, of like really intense schooling to learn all these things, and to live away from home when they might never have left their own house, their own local area. May now you got to fly across the country or do something like that, and really takes getting out of their comfort zone, or to become a sister and essentially leave family behind, and know that once I enter in there, if I get to the point of novitiate, I won't be really even be able to talk to my family for a period of time, or and things. Those are really outside the comfort. And again, if we look at it 100%, and let's say that 97% of people are called to the marriage state, and then 2+% are called to that for religious priesthood, or I don't know exactly how the number would work out. You're really left with like this tiny fraction of the pie that is left for the single vocation. And um, and I think that for that at times people end up in that vocation because they don't get out of their comfort area, um, and sort of end up single rather than realizing that it's truly what God is actually asking of them and calling them to do. And so I don't think that it is necessarily one that needs to be presented, at least not as a general rule. If, however, as they are praying for their vocation in life, and how do you know? Again, it's not, you're not, can't expect to have a voice come whispering in your ear, telling you to do something. Um, but God inspires by natural um, desire instilled in the heart, by as answer to prayer, and circumstances in life that are presented, and different means of indicating it. So when we pray, if we are, in general, listening to try to understand where that answer is coming from, then we might find indicators towards that, towards one vocation or another. And not all of a sudden it seems like, you know to the surprise of most, um, that all things are sort of pointing in that direction towards the single vocation. Then I think it merits at that point sort of explaining and kind of pursuing, at least inquiring about with priests to talk about, is this something that you think is actually right for me or not? Or,
And it makes sense, Father, that I guess you want to be active again in the two active vocations, as we're saying generally. Yeah, go to these retreats. I mean, that there are retreats for sisters, and I know they're in Florida and Spokane, Omaha. I'm not sure you have them yet in Cincinnati, but that they're, and go and talk to your priest, see if you check out a seminary, one of the traditional seminaries, and that's a little harder, I think, but these things are available. And then, of course, you have the things like the YAG, which is
mhm,
the young adult get together, which it doesn't mean you're going to go there and find your spouse, but I'm sure you would agree, Father. It doesn't hurt if the worst thing you're doing is meeting friends, but you're also, I think, getting an idea of,
yeah,
more of that idea of, is this my vocation or not, even if you're not going to find your spouse there. And that just makes sense that you start with prayer, but then you're also actively saying, okay, I'm going to go and try to actively, because I mean, I think of it this way, like, if how many people like going to a job interview, right? Maybe a few
right,
sanguines, right? There's a small percentage, but most people hate it, right? I mean, I hate it, but you got to do it because you got to work. Well, it's the same for a vocation, right? I mean, you got to work, as you said, exactly as you said, Father. You got to get out of your comfort zone, do things that you don't really want to do. You'd rather sit around and read a book. But are you fulfilling your vocation?
mhm,
Not likely, right? Not likely.
right,
You got to be more active.
yeah, exactly. And again, I think that because, and I think the reason why, um the like the thinking, starting off from a point of like, oh, I should pray if I should be single or not, as like a general starting point, is not really where to focus the efforts, is because of the fact that, like you pointed out, is that it it sort of plays into one's natural inclinations, and also that is what is ultimately dangerous about the single life more than the other vocations, is that, although it is a danger of all of the vocations, is that it can tend towards allowing for like a selfishness, that it's a that it is seeking after like their own comfort, their own gains, their own, whatever it may be, rather than doing something that might push themselves. And um, it has to be, like I said, I think it's one of those things that, and it's such a minority that are actually called to that. I think it needs to be viewed as such that, you know uh, almost like, I doubt God calls me to this, it's one of these other things. And if it's not meant to be, then God will show me, because if I'm praying earnestly, God will show me where I'm supposed to be. and usually that that ends up being sort of um, that indicator of of circumstances that sort of put you in that way, that life circumstances make it that way, and then once realized, it's sort of like, okay, now how do I sanctify this reality? Yeah, because it's almost, yeah, it really is actually, if lived correctly, should be a sacrificial
Right.
life.
Exactly.
Um, uh,
And they even say it's like the hardest, like you said, about it, because you're actively you're a virgin and you're doing it in the
yeah,
world. And it makes sense that there's a that makes sense that that would be the hardest vocation. So
yeah,
Father,
and
no, go
when you
ahead.
think about it, yeah, and when you think about it too, at least for the priesthood and the marriage state, we also have sacramental graces to assist in our
Right.
in in our states in life. The religious life not isn't necessarily um, there isn't a sacrament to become a consecrated religious. However, it's it's certainly sacramental adjacent, I guess you could say, because you are placing yourself in it has the other side of it, which is to say the they refer to it as the regular life, that you have a regularity of life. You have a stability and an expectation, and laying out of like um, how you're supposed to live, that sort of, you have obedience, you have all this that sort of takes the burden off of your shoulders of, gee, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to, do this well? Well, I just, follow along as to the way it's sort of laid out for me, and do what I'm supposed to do in my day-to-day life. And it has the time for prayer, and the time for reading, and the time for work, and things like that, sort of, presented to you, rather than trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do about my day, what to fulfill my responsibility. So, and it's definitely centered around the sacraments. If you're religious, well, your whole dedication is to the church, and so the expectation is that you're at every available mass, you avail yourself of confession on a regular basis. You know communion as often as possible, hopefully daily, um, and visits the Blessed Sacraments and all these type of things that are regularly there. But if you're single, well, you really sort of make that harder. You don't have the obedience and the rule to follow, but you also don't have the sacrament to grace you, to assist you along that way. And moreover, you still have to operate and live in the world, which is going to divide your attention. You don't have mutual support from others to do that and everything. And so, when recognized as true light, um, it is really a bit of a difficult task, but it is one that, if lived well, can be sanctified. So,
And so I'd ask you, Father, and I know these things are case by case basis, so I recommend everyone to go to your priest and talk to them about it individually. But I mean, I guess I'd give you a couple scenarios, if you don't mind giving advice on it. So let's
sure.
say a male or female, 25 years old. They haven't really had any, what do you want to call it, luck, good fortune finding a potential spouse. They're not really sure what to do. They feel like they're starting to get into real true adulthood at around 25. Like, practically, what should they, besides of course praying, but what do you think they should practically do? They want to find their vocation. They're probably done with university, college already, or vocational school, whatever it is. They're taking that next step to adulthood. What practically should they do?
Well, I think that in that's that's the thing about the single life that is good, though, um, is that you could have that transitory adult single existence, and so what somebody needs to do if they are um, actually going to end up being single for their lives, versus what they need to do if they are an adult completed with school and has a job and everything, and hasn't had success yet in finding a spouse or something like that, um is the same thing. And so and so I think in that, and which is also why I don't think that like single vocation is a pursued vocation necessarily,
Right.
usually speaking, because you are already doing those things. And so what somebody needs to do in that situation is exactly that. Come back to that simple thing. I'm made to love and to serve God, and that has to be my primary effort in that day. So I need to make sort of a rule of life for myself, to discipline myself, where I have prayers that are laid out, time for some spiritual reading, time for doing these things. And then I have to realize that what the things that I have that might that um are viewed like by the outside, by those looking in, as going like, oh, that'd be kind of nice sometimes, I need to use to my advantage. Your liberty of time, your liberty of funds, your freedom from the dependence, these are the types of things that need to be recognized and realized, that this is meant to be part of that serving God in that vocation. So it's and not to be held on to in a selfish manner. Um, when you look at, you know, I think that's one of the frustrating things about it, and why, and also an indicator of why it's so hard to effectively live religious life. I mean, a single vocation is because I so rarely see it done actually well.
Mm.
Um, it's like, I think about these things, like when, like when it's like I look at just through like the eyes of somebody who runs churches and things like, and missions and whatever, right? It's like when a ride is needed from an airport, the vast majority of time I'm being picked up by somebody who's married and has children.
Mm.
When
Interesting.
work needs to be done for, you know, some sort of like feast or festival, or, a parish party or whatever, the people that we are able to rely on are oftentimes married people. The, work of ironing linens and doing, picking up things that are needed for the church, or, you know, aiding in cleaning the church, or, working on the church grounds or whatever. How often those things are done by married people with and how infrequently they're done by people who are single. Now, yes, it's great for married people to volunteer for those things. It's really an opportunity for virtue for them. It's a great way to instill that same upon their children, to do that, giving themselves to the church and everything. But the question ends up being, where are the single people? Why aren't they at least joining in? Uh, Not, where is that time gone? You can't say that the husband who's married with kids doesn't have a job that he has to work. You can't say that he has more time than you do. It's, how many, like now it kind of, I guess it kind of becomes like the introspective questioning of the listener, right? Like, if you are single, whether it be that you are still searching for a spouse or pursuing a vocation of some sort, or that you've been in that position, long enough, like you have to, and it's not meant as a mean thing. It's just every one of us is supposed to ask that. I have to ask myself of that regularly. Like, what did I do with my time during the day today? Where could I have utilized it better? How can I grow in the way of perfection? The single people that are out there, single adults, that is, like, what have you done in that service? Like, if you're a young man and you're 25 years old, do you know how to serve mass?
Mm.
And if you don't, why don't you know how to serve mass? If you're a young lady, you know and you have like some level of like decent voice, have you pursued the idea of maybe volunteering for the choir and learning how to like sing well for the choir, or a man that has a beautiful voice? So, have you tried to pursue that idea of singing in the choir, or learning chant and things like that? Um, again, ask your priest, who is it that irons linens, and does he need somebody to help? You know, iron purificators. Wash linens, replace the altar linens, and take care of things. Where do your talents lie? Maybe you're not good at something like that, but it's like, is there lawn that needs to be mowed there, or what, like anything at all, like that should be, you should be actively pursuing, trying to help out in some way. Also, again, you have a liberty of funds. um, you know Maybe not as you're starting out, because a lot of people that are single are young people, and that are going to get married someday. And so, that prudence of saving up money to build a future upon type of thing. But for a person who isn't necessarily with that on the prospect horizon, like there are plenty of places that could benefit from additional, you know, uh, funding for projects and things like that. Be generous in that. It's not to say that you just throw your money all over the place indiscriminately, but to understand that, like, there are there are things that'll come up in the church. It's like, oh, I'll jump at that, and donate to that, or all those foreign missions I want to commit to helping out, or whatever it may be. Those things are important. Like I said, it's not one size fits all, but it is that underlying core value of selflessness. I have been given these aspects of time and um, and ability to serve in whatever capacity. How can I do so? Do I have a good mind for for being able to not only understand the faith but teach the faith? Okay, maybe there's catechism classes that need teachers for the school, or the church, or whatever it might be. Various things that come along, and you know, and it might even just be when you talk to your priest and say, like, hey, I wanted to do more, like whatever it is. He might not have something readily at hand, but at least he knows that you keep presenting yourself and saying, hey, I'm here to help, I'm here to serve. You point me in the direction you need me, and I'm willing to to do it. I understand I have this this state in life that is conducive towards that end. You present yourself enough times that you'll get used at some point. And so it's good in that way. Moreover, I think of it as like, are you, the single person, availing yourself of the opportunities that you have for the sacraments? You do not live a life that is centered around the church necessarily, because you have to go to work and things. But like, I do think of it as in, you know, again, just sort of like looking around at places like St. Gertrude's or St. Hugh, or other like locations that we have mass and things. Um, those, like, I think of it and I'm looking like at St. Gertrude's, for instance, just the easiest example. Um, it's I always say that if a person, especially a single person who doesn't have those family responsibilities, um, we have a 5:45 mass on in the evening on Friday with benediction. We have two early morning masses on Saturday, and then of course there's Sunday. Um, Pretty much any single person that is at that church um, could be able to get to almost half the week's masses without even changing their schedule, um, if they thought of it a little bit more in that vein of light. And it's not to say that people don't. We definitely do have single people that do that and more with the masses. It's just, but it's not all. It's not all. And and it's meant to be just an illustrator for the broader brush for other people at other chapels. It's not pointed at any individual or anything like that. But it's a good point. It's that's without even adjusting the schedule. It's just showing up.
And what better place to meet other singles than in the vestibule? I mean, come on,
Yeah,
that's if you're
yeah,
coming out of mass and you see someone who's there all the time, like, hey, are you single? And that's kind of you answered a lot of my questions for the other scenario, kind of being right. So if you get to be 40 years old, what do you do? And I think you've answered that pretty well, Father. That you make yourself available. You become a help to the people around you, especially to the church. I have a friend here who's 40 something. He's single, but he goes around, he builds altars for the priests all around Germany. He goes one to the next, and he's working on their homes and on their altars, and it's incredible. And I mean,
yeah,
it truly, you see through him, it's like that's what it should be. This is what it's unfortunate for him. It's hard. It's a sacrifice. I know. I think he would like to be married, as far as I know, but he takes that on himself and says, "Okay, no, I do have the time and the
yeah,
skill," and he uses it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think one more thing that I think I've said already, but I mean, remembering that if you are single and looking for, you think your vocation is the married life, which, as Father said, it probably is. Treat it like a vocation. Don't actively search for it. And I don't just sit
yeah.
around waiting for it to happen. It is a, you have to go and get it. It's not just going to be handed to
Yeah.
you on a platter. Usually,
And you brought up a really great point there too, which was going to be the next thing. Is it's not just the service of God to the church, but it's also the opportunities that are afforded to you for charity in myriads of other ways too, right? So it is like you said, somebody needs, you happen to have talent as you know as a carpenter, and you can go and assist somebody that needs some drywall done at their house instead of them having to, that things are tight for a lot of people, and maybe that person has a project going on at their house, and hey, a couple of qualified hands to hang some drywall and stuff like that. It's great. It's how welcome is that? Or you have somebody's moving. Well, hey, let me help you move. Let me help you move. Let me carry an end of the couch for you. It's nobody likes to move. There's zero people that like to move, but it's welcome to have two extra hands to actually lug stuff along and do those things. It's
in
that.
sorry, real quick, Father, just to comment, because it's so true, and I think that maybe part of that single life, what you can get from that too, is the gratitude of the people that you help. Right? I mean, it really, you also do get that feeling of wow. And it just happened. The same guy, a friend of mine, he did that. He lives 5 hours away from us, and I just randomly, I texted him kind of as a joke, almost like, "Hey, you want to help us move?" And he showed up. He showed up and he helped us
Yeah,
move. And he was there. He drove 5 hours to be there just to help us move. And that was, and I mean, I hope I expressed the gratitude that I felt. But that's, I mean, it showed me that he cared about me, and I think I hope I showed it to him too. And I think that it's kind of, it works together, and I think it's a beautiful thing if you do it right.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it's like I remember she's deceased now. She died a handful of years ago, but there's a woman that was at the St. Gertrude's that she was a lifelong single woman, older lady, and she came and dedicated, I forget, it was like, I think it was like maybe there's like 2 or 3 of the weekdays, she was dedicated to spending the entire day working in the sacristy. And she took
Wow.
it upon herself to do, like, and we're always got all these different shrines and that are constantly changing. Like, and like we have small shrines and big shrines, and the big shrines, like those things require a lot of work and talent of like putting them up and everything like that. And so she was always in charge of like the shrines. She was in charge of doing the flowers. She was, all of those things. And that was just, nothing asked in return. Just I'm here on, whatever, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, here to work in the sacristy is, you could count
Wow.
on her being there for like clockwork. And it's, again, it's just something that, that's living that single life. It's recognizing I have the ability to assist in this way, and that's what I'm going to do. And but yeah, like the opportunities for charity, it's abound in that way when one is single. But it needs to be something that, you know, it needs to be an active understanding that my time is not my own. And while
Mm-hmm.
I'm not tied down by the responsibilities of these other things, I need to be more generous in my time in presenting myself in those points. And I need to be, somebody that can be counted on and be reliable in those areas as well. That are good that way, because every single vocation ends up being that way. As soon as is in any vocation in life, or any state of life, I should say, because again, oftentimes single state as an adult is transitory. Um, that it the number one danger for any of them is to become selfish. Uh, in married life, I mean, it's the source of most arguments. Where it's when somebody starts looking to their own wants before that of their spouse or their children, that they start putting those things first, or looking for some sort of reciprocation in return, and being upset when it's not found, or whatever. It's, at its core, it has selfishness as the thing that starts to eat away at it. Same thing with the priesthood. It's, as soon as one starts becoming selfish with their time, whether towards God or towards the parishioners, then it starts to eat away and cause problems in their vocation. And it's that way with the single life. It's so easy to become lazy. It's so easy to become complacent. It's so easy to become selfish with that time and thing, or money, or talents, or whatever it is, and say, I'm kind of tired. Won't stick my nose out there to see what's going on, because kind of comfortable sitting here, in my house right now, or whatever it is. Um, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, I mean, how many listeners live where their parish is in an area that gets snow? And apparently in the United States, that's everywhere now, because we got snow in like Louisiana and Florida and
Florida,
stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
true.
but but I mean, like, on a normal aspect of getting snow, where, how many of you live in places that get snow? And if you're a single person, when was the last time when it snowed you went down and shoveled the church? You know, um, you know, did your priest wield the shovel during
Hmm,
a snowstorm? You
great
know,
question. Yeah.
and it's not that we're incapable of shoveling. Um, Although my back and shoulders and everything like that screamed at me that I was getting older, but it's not that I'm incapable of shoveling. But the question is like, you think about that, is like, you know who is shoveling the sidewalk of your church,
Yeah.
and the entranceway and the walkways, and all of those things? Who's doing it to the old lady that is a widow at your
Mm.
church? Who's doing her drive? Who's shoveling her stairs? That's These are the things where it's like, when you can be like, Mrs. Smith, do not call your kids. Do not, unless, I mean, maybe the kids are nearby, and then is the primary point of contact for doing those things. They have a responsibility to take care of their parents. But maybe they don't live near their kids, or maybe they're not that close, that don't have kids, or are not close to their kids or something. And like, okay, this lady's going to try to get out there and uh, do this, or she's going to hire somebody to come and do it and pay money to do it. And you're like, "I'm 10 minutes away from you. I'll come down there. I'll be down. Don't call that guy. I'll be down to take care of your walkway, Mrs. Smith. I'll be there. And those are the things that you're afforded as a single person, and that's when you start living that state of life that you're in.
Well, and it's, as everyone knows, it's a cliche, but it's true that, I mean, living selflessly is certainly living more happy too. I mean, it's a lot more fulfilling. Everyone's gonna, if you do that, you're gonna feel better about it, and you'll be living more up to your vocation. So I think that's it's one of those things. It's hard to practice, because our fallen human nature gets away from gets away from the, what we should be doing. We just want to be selfish and lazy. But boy, once you actually fulfill that and act selflessly. I mean, some of my happiest moments of my life for sure are when I've been selfless, and the worst moments of my life were when I was selfish. So it is that simple, not easy, but it is pretty simple. And it's interesting, Father. And I hope that the people watching this are. I think there's been a lot. There's been a lot. I already have my vocation, thank goodness. But there's been a lot for me to think about. There's been a lot to ponder and to really, yeah, contemplate regarding this. And there are a lot of people who are in this. Obviously, people, I think most of them searching for a spouse. Many will never find it. And I think maybe, Father, I mean, maybe again, I guess it's the same though. If they're 40 and you're pretty sure at that point, you've missed it for whatever reason, bad luck, circumstances, etc. I guess you have to then kind of shift your focus and say, okay,
Yeah,
now,
and I
now
mean,
what?
and in the state in the church that it is, you know, if
Yeah.
people are going about the marriage vocation the way that they're supposed to, which is uncompromising on the faith, not marrying somebody that differs in religion with them, then it makes it that much more difficult. And sometimes, like you said, it might be that people just end up in that vocation, as a matter of fact. And it doesn't mean at all that you can't be of great service to God and to his church by doing that. It gives ample opportunity for virtue. And I think that anybody in their lives, if they view their day as the day is going to provide me, so many opportunities to practice virtue throughout the day, and it is my job, it is up to me to try to recognize those opportunities when they're at hand and to seize them as much as I can, then everybody is going to be not only sanctifying themselves but growing in the way of perfection in whatever vocation it is, at its core, because those basic fundamental principles for all of the vocations apply. The actions that are and how you operate in a vocation are what's different, but the core aspect of that selflessness, that service of God, service of his church, service of neighbor for love of God, that those things are the core foundation of all of the vocations in life. And it's all it needs to be used for that purpose of getting myself from this life to heaven. And how do I do that? I grow in the way of perfection, and I do that by seizing those opportunities of virtue. So
Perfect, Father. I think in my mind that was a perfect way to wrap it up. I'll leave you. I don't know if you have any last thoughts, but that was, to me, that's it.
no, I think that's good
Perfect.
stuff.
Father, as always, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate it. We hope everyone who watched this did as well. And I really, please, I ask you to please to share this, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. But really to share it, because there are many people who are in this. I've had people ask me this question on several occasions. Can you please talk with a priest about the single life? And hopefully Father has clarified things. I'm sure he has. I mean, even in my mind, Father's clarified things. One more time, I'll shout out that book. Sorry, I'll give you just a sec. Just that book again, Parents, Children, and the Facts of Life, Father Henry Sattler. I think you can find it. Just Google it. You should be able to order it in the U.S. without a problem. Very helpful for especially for young parents.
I did think of one last thought,
Please.
which is to say that if a person is single, and they've had it in their mind that they've, like you said, they've been trying to find a spouse or do whatever, or circumstances have indicated to them that that they're supposed to be there, or maybe they still have that aspiration to get married, or whatever it is, it's just taking longer than they expected to. Whatever it is, do not let it be something that discourages you, because whether it's transitory or it's permanent, you all that matters at the end of the day is that in my lifetime right now, am I serving and loving God well? Am I moving myself closer to heaven? And if you can answer yes to that question, then God will take care of whatever he needs to on his end of things. But ultimately, don't let it, because that is one of the things that I think also can be a point that we kind of, I forgot to mention about the single life, that because you don't have someone along with you to really encourage you in where you are in life, that it can easily become discouraging, and that discouragement is what will very quickly snowball into other aspects of that failure to grow and to live that life well. So
Great. Perfect. Father Stephen McKenna, thank you as always. We hope to see you again soon. And yeah, prayers for all of you single people out there. And if you're looking for a spouse, go to the yagincincy.org. I think. I see. I didn't prepare myself for that one. Yag in Cincy. If you Google Yag in Cincy, like Cincinnati, you will certainly find it. That will be sometime this summer. I think July, Father, something like that. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
perfect. Father, until next time. God bless you.
Published too.